Hello dear students, welcome back to another session of history. Today we are on lesson number 8, Vital Villages, Thriving Towns. So let's begin the chapter. Prabhakar at the blacksmith shop. Prabhakar sat watching the smiths at the local shop. There were a small bench on which iron tools like axes and sickles were laid out, ready for sale. A bright fire was burning, and two men were hitting and beating metal rods into shape. It was very hot and noisy, and yet it was fascinating to watch what was happening. So when you go to the blacksmith shop, or when you pass by the blacksmith shop, we can see that people making the iron things, the metal things by beating and also by hitting. Then the things made of iron, like we can see the grills of the windows, the grills of the balconies, isn't it? How they make? They make by hitting and by beating the metal rod and by giving different kinds of designs. So in this way, the blacksmiths, they make different kinds of things out of the iron. Now, iron tools and agriculture. We often take the use of iron for granted today. Things made of iron and steel are a part of our daily lives. The use of iron began in the subcontinent around 3000 years ago. Some of the largest collections of iron tools or weapons were found in the megalithic burials, about which you read in chapter 4. Around 2005 years ago, there is evidence for the growing use of iron tools. This includes axes for clearing forests and the iron plowshare, as you have seen in chapter 5. And the plowshare was useful for increasing agricultural production. Now, the sickles, these are the iron tools. This is the axe, then this is the tongs, and this is the sickles. Other step to increase production, irrigation. The kings and kingdoms you have been reading about could not have existed without the support of flourishing villages. While new tools and the system of transplantations increased production, irrigation was also used. Irrigation works that were built during this time included canals, wells, tanks, and artificial lakes. If you look at the chart, you will find that some of the stages in the constructions of irrigation works are mentioned. Fill in the rest by using the following phrases. Labor is provided by the people. Farmers also benefit because crop production is more certain. Farmers have to increase production to pay taxes. Kings provide money and plan irrigation work. So, these are the some of the phrases have been filled up. The next you have to fill it up. The kings need money for armies, places, and forts. So, which is the answer? See. The kings provide money and planned irrigation work, isn't it? They also provide money and they also planned for irrigation work. Now, farmers have to increase production to pay taxes. What is that? They demand taxes from farmers. Who are these? The kings, they demand taxes from the farmers. Now we have who lived in the villages. There were at least 3 different kinds of people living in the foremost villages in the southern and northern parts of the subcontinent. In the Tamil region, larger landowners were known as Vellalar, ordinarily plowmen were known as Zuzavar, and landless laborers including slaves were known as Kadisiyar and Adimai. In the northern part of the country, the village headman was known as a Grama Bhojaka. Usually, men from the same family held the position for generations. In other words, the posts were hereditary. The Grama Bhojaka was often the largest landowner. Generally, he had slaves and hired workers to cultivate the land. Besides, as he was powerful, the king often used him to collect taxes from the village. He was functioned as a judge and sometimes as a policeman. Apart from the Grama Bhojaka, there were other independent farmers known as Grihapatis, most of whom were smaller landowners. And then there were men and women such as Dasa and Karmakara, who did not own land and had to earn a living working on the fields owned by others. In most villages, there were also some craftspersons such as the blacksmith, porter, carpentry, and weaver. So, in most new tools and systems were increased for productions and as well as for irrigation purpose. Now, here in the Tamil region, we can see that three kinds of people were existed. That the large land owners, the ordinary plowmen, and the landless laborers. That the landless laborers, that includes the slaves also. Now in the northern India, the village headmen, then the independent farmers, then the workers, they lived in villages. And in most of the villages, there were also some craftsperson such as the potter, then the carpenter, then also the blacksmiths, and some were also weavers. Now the earliest Tamil composition, some of the earliest work in Tamil known as Sangam literature were composed around 2300 years ago. These texts were called Sangam because they were supposed to have been composed and compiled in assemblies known as Sangams of ports that were held in the city of Madurai. The Tamil term mentioned above are found in Sangam literature. So some 2300 years ago, the Sangam literature was composed in Tamil. Now finding out about cities, stories, travelers, sculpture and archaeology. You may have heard of the Jatakas. These were stories that were probably composed by ordinary people and then written down and preserved by Buddhist monks. Here is a part of Jataka story which tells us how a poor man gradually became rich. So the Jatakas were the stories that were composed by ordinary people and written down on the light on the life of the people of the villagers who became rich. The clever poor man. Now from the Jataka story we can find out how this from the Jataka we can find out how the clever man how the clever poor story of the clever poor man. Once upon a time, there was a clever poor young man who lived in a city. His only resources was a dead rat. He started off by selling it for a coin to a hotel for their cat. Then one day, there was a storm. The king's garden was littered with branches and leaves, and the gardener was at a loss as to how to clear the mess. The young man offered to clean the garden if he could keep the wood and leaves. The gardener agreed at once. So what did the young man offer? The young man offered to clear the garden if he could keep the wood and leaves. And then the gardener, he agreed. The young man rounded up all the children who were playing with an offer of sweets for every stick and leaf that they could collect. In no time, every scrap had been neatly piled near the entrance. Just then the king's potter was on the lookout for fuel with which to bake his pots. So he took the whole lot and paid the young man for it. Our young man now thought of another plan. He carried a jar full of water to the city gate and offered water to 500 grass cutters. They were pleased and said, "You have done us a good turn. Tell us, what can we do for you?" He replied, "I will let you know when I need your help." He then made friends with a trader. One day the trader told him, Tomorrow, a horse dealer is coming to town with 500 horses. Hearing this, our young man went back to the grass cutter. He said, "Please give me a bundle of grass each and don't sell your grass till mine is sold." They agreed and gave him 500 bundles of grass. When the horse dealer could not buy grass anywhere else, he purchased the young man's grass for 1,000 coins. So by utilizing different ideas of how to do business, this clever poor man, he started becoming rich. Now we can use other kinds of evidence to find out about life in some of these early cities. Sculptures carved scenes depicting people's life in towns and villages as well as in the forest. Many of these sculptures were used to decorate railings, pillars and gateways of buildings that were visited by people. Now facing page, ring well found in Delhi. In what ways do you think the system of drainage was different from that of the Harappans? In the Harappan civilization, we can see that how the people built the house with a drainage system that was shaped in a ring. Now you have to find out what is the difference between the ring well drainage found in Delhi and during the Harappan civilization. Now next, many of the cities that developed from about 2500 years ago were capitals of the Mahajanapadas that you learned about in chapter 5. As we have seen, some of these cities were surrounded by massive fortification walls. In many cities, archaeologists have found rows of pots or ceramic rings arranged one on top of the other. These are known as ring wells. So this is a picture of the ring wells which the archaeologists have founded. They seem to have been put as toilets in some cases and as a drain and garbage dumps. These ring wells are usually found in individual houses. We have hardly any remains of palaces, markets, or of homes or ordinary people. Perhaps some are yet to be discovered by archaeologists. Others made of wood, mud, brick, and thatch may not have survived. Another way of finding out about early cities is from the accounts of sailors and travelers who visited them. One of the most detailed accounts that has been found was by an unknown Greek sailor. He described all the ports he visited. Find Bharuch on map 7, page 105, and then read these descriptions of the city. The story of Bharagaza, the Greek name for Bharuch. The gulf is very narrow at Bharagaza and very hard to navigate for those coming from the sea. Ships had to be steered in by skillful and experienced local fishermen who were employed by the king. The imports in Bharagaza were wine, copper, tin, lead, coral, topaz, cloth, gold and silver coins. Exports from the town including plants from the Himalayas, ivory, agate, carnelian, cotton, silk and perfumes. Special gifts were brought by merchants for the king. These included vessels of silver, singing boys, beautiful women, fine wines and fine clothes. Now punchmark coins. Punchmark coins were generally rectangular or sometimes square or round in shape, either cut out of metal sheets or made out of flattened metal globules, a small spherical body. These coins were not inscribed, but were stamped with symbols using dies or punches. Hence, they are called punchmark coins. These coins are found over most parts of the subcontinent and remained in circulation till the early centuries CE. Now coins. You have noticed how wealth is measured in terms of coins in the story on page 82. Archaeologists have found several thousands of coins belonging to this period. The earliest coins which were in use for about 500 years were punch mark coins, such as the ones shown below. This is the punch mark coins. There were no inscription. Only it was marked by dice or by punches. Other means of exchange. Read this story poem from the Sangam collection. As they carry the white paddy of their land to exchange it for the salt of another, crossing the long roads in carts, through sand white as moonlight, taking whole families who hate to be left behind. The departure of the salt merchants leaves the city empty. Salt was produced plentifully along the sea coast. Now cities with many functions. Very often a single town was important for a variety of reasons. Let us look at the example of Mathura. Mathura has been an important settlement for more than 2500 years. It was important because it was located at the crossroads of two major routes of travel and trade, from the northwest to the east and from north to south. There were fortifications around the city, and several shrines, farmers and herders from adjoining areas provided food for people in the city. Mathura was also a center where some extremely fine sculptures were produced. Now, Mathura is an important settlement for more than 2500 years. It was located at the crossroads of two important travel and trade routes. It became the capital of the Kushanas about 2000 years ago, and it was also a religious center. Around 2000 years ago, Mathura became the second capital of the Kushanas, about whom you will be reading in chapter 9. Mathura was a religious center. There was a Buddhist monastery, Jaina shrines, and it was an important center for the worship of Krishna. Mathura, where Lord Krishna was born. Several inscriptions on surface such as stones, slabs and statues have been found in Mathura. Generally, these are short inscriptions recording gifts made by man and sometimes women to monasteries and shrines. They were made by kings and queens, officers, merchants and craftspersons who lived in the city. For instance, inscriptions from Mathura mention goldsmith, blacksmith, weavers, basket makers, garland makers, perfumers, crafts and craftsperson. We also have archaeological evidence for crafts. This includes extremely fine pottery known as the Northern Black Polish War, NBPW. It gets its name from the fact that it is generally found in the northern part of the subcontinent. Remember that the archaeological evidence for many crafts may not have survived. We know from texts that the manufacture of cloth was important. There were famous centers such as Varanasi in the north and Madurai in the south. Both men and women worked in these centers. Many craftspersons and merchants now form associations known as shrinis. These shrinis of craftspersons provided training, procured raw materials and distributed the finished products. Then shrinis of merchants organized the trade. Shrinis also served as banks where rich men and women deposited money. This was invested and part of the interest was returned or used to support religious institutions such as monasteries. Now, archaeologists have also found evidence for crafts like the extremely fine pottery called Northern Black Polish Ware. There were famous cloth centers at Varanasi and Madurai. Craftspersons and merchants form associations called the shrinis. They helped them in their work. Especially, shrinis also served as banks where rich men and women deposited money. And then this money were used to support for the religious institution such as the Buddhist monasteries. Now, rules for spinning and weaving. These rules are from the Arthashastra mentioned in chapter 7. Arthashastra was written by Chanakya. They describe how spinning and weaving could be done in workshop under the supervision of special officials. widows, young women who are differently abled, nuns, mothers of courtesans, retired women, servants of the king, women who have retired from service in temples, may be used for processing wool, bark, cotton, hemp, and flax. They should be paid according to the quality and quantity of work. Women who are not permitted to leave their homes can send maid servants to bring the raw materials from the superintendent and take the finished work back to him. Women who can visit the workshop should go at dawn to give their work and receive their wages. There should be enough light to examine the work. In case the superintendent looks at the woman or talks about anything other than the work, he should be punished. If a woman does not complete her work, she will have to pay a fine, and her thumbs can be cut off. So these were the rules for spinning and weaving, which was from the Arthashastra. A closer look. Archeological. Find Archeological in Puducherry on map 7 and read the box on Rome on page 88. Between 2200 and 1900 years ago, Archeological was a coastal settlement where ships unloaded goods from distant lands. A massive brick structure, which may have been a warehouse, was found at the site. Other finds include pottery from the Mediterranean region, such as amphora, and stamped red glazed pottery known as Argentine ware, which was named after a city in Italy. This was made by pressing wet clay into stamped mold. There were yet another kind of pottery which was made locally, though Roman designs were used. Roman lamps, glassware, and gems have also been found at the site. Small tanks have been found that were probably dyeing vats used to dye clothes. There is plenty of evidence for the making of beads from semi-precious stones and glass. Now, Tamil and Brahmin inscriptions. These are the Tamil and Brahmin inscriptions. Several pieces of pottery have inscriptions in Brahmin, which was used to write Tamil. Now, elsewhere, find Rome on map 6, page number 76. This is one of the oldest cities in Europe and developed around the same time as the cities in the Ganga Valley. Rome was the capital of one of the largest empires, one that spread across Europe, North Africa, and West Asia. Augustus, one of the most important emperors who ruled about 2000 years ago, said that he found Rome a city of brick and made it into a city of marble. He and later rulers built temples and palaces. They also built huge amphitheaters, open arenas surrounded by tiers of seats, where citizens could watch all kinds of shows and public baths, which were separate timings for man and woman, where people met and relaxed. Huge aqueducts, channels to supply water, were built to bring water to the city for the baths, fountains, and toilets. So this is the end of the chapter. Next time we will meet with a new topic. Till then, students, take care and thank you so much.